In this video, I will compare the video quality of the GoPro Hero 9 with the video quality of the iPhone 12. It is clear that the GoPro and the iPhone 12 are two completely different devices. The GoPro as an action camera is especially characterized by a waterproof and shockproof body, but also by a huge ecosystem of mounts. The iPhone as a smartphone is of course much more than a camera, even though the camera is a very important part of this device. But if you're not necessarily looking for a camera for skiing or diving, but for example for a camera for travel videos, then the question arises which of these two devices produces the better images. Let's find out together in this video. With these first shots you can see right away that you can get very beautiful results with both cameras. But here I would like to show you a very important difference, the difference in the focal length. This is the image of the iPhone with the ultra-wide lens, and this one with the standard lens. If we now would overlay all the three images, this would be the difference in framing. The GoPro offers the largest frame. The two white squares stand for the two lenses of the iPhone. It is clear that it is a huge advantage to have more than one lens available. And by the way, all these shots were taken in the highest possible resolution, so in 5K on the GoPro and in 4K on the iPhone. Now let's take a closer look at the colors and the exposure. As you can see here, the image of the GoPro is much warmer and in this case also clearly darker exposed. Here you can see once again what a difference the standard lens makes. Of course, you can get much closer than with the GoPro or the ultra-wide lens. The next two shots are exposed very similarly. Here are a few interesting things that catch my eye. The GoPro image looks slightly more saturated. The sky has a completely different color. The blue of the GoPro goes towards teal. And there is something else you should pay attention to. In the GoPro image, the bright areas in the clouds are burnt out, while the iPhone protects the highlights much better, and this although you can see more details even in the dark areas of the iPhone shot. If we zoom in, however, the GoPro can clearly score. The image of the GoPro shows much more details. Look at the roof or the writing on the building, for example. You can also see similar differences in these two images as before. The GoPro image is more saturated and warmer. The blue looks brighter and shifts towards teal as before. Note here, when looking at the image of the iPhone and at the tree on the right side, on how much the iPhone stretches the tree with the ultra-wide lens. Here I have compared the standard lens of the iPhone with the GoPro. The shots were taken during the golden hour. Notice how much brighter the dark areas in the foreground are on the image of the iPhone. Let's see if the standard lens of the iPhone can keep up better when it comes to details. The comparison is difficult of course, because the focal lengths are very different. Here at 400%, and here I have zoomed in the GoPro shot to 680% to get the same framing as with the iPhone. Although this is of course an unfair comparison, the shot of the GoPro shows almost the same amount of detail. The GoPro's 5K sensor therefore provides much more detail than an iPhone shot. The most important of all colors is the color of the skin tones. I actually like the skin tones of both cameras very much. Like before, the skin tones on the GoPro image are a bit more saturated. In addition, the skin tones of the GoPro may look a bit redder or orange. What is also noticeable is that the GoPro smooths the skin a little bit, as if you would put a beauty filter on your face. You can like that or not. In this comparison with the standard lens of the iPhone produces the clearly more detailed and natural looking image. It also creates a natural background blur. This makes the image look more cinematic. And this brings us to another important difference between the two cameras. The iPhone can create a very cinematic background blur, especially with the standard lens. This is interesting for B-roll shots, close-ups or as before, for shots of faces. This is not possible with the GoPro. The wide lens of the GoPro does not allow it. In addition, the GoPro's focus is fixed to infinity, which makes objects in the close foreground look blurred. And in case you're new here, my name is Werner, I live in the Italian Alps, and on this channel I do filmmaking tutorials and reviews of consumer cameras. Consider subscribing if you're interested in these topics. For current prices and offers for the GoPro Hero 9 and the iPhone 12, you will find links in the video description. A very important aspect of the image quality of a camera is the dynamic range. That is how well a camera can handle situations where there are very bright and very dark areas in the same image. Let's take a look at how both devices can handle such situations. We have already gotten a few impressions of this earlier. With these comparison shots, the difference is once again clearly visible. The image of the iPhone shows much more details in the darker areas, and at the same time the iPhone protects the highlights, that is the bright areas in the image, better. Look at the sky. You can see that the image taken by the iPhone shows much more details in the clouds. Again, I shot directly into the sun. Both cameras produce very nice images, but the shot of the iPhone has an incredible dynamic range. Even in the very bright areas of the image, hardly any details are lost. These shots of the iPhone were taken without Dolby Vision HDR, like all previous shots in this video by the way. Here you can see a comparison of iPhone shots with and without Dolby Vision. Dolby Vision results in a slightly overexposed image with less contrast. On the iPhone itself, however, the image looks completely different and much better. That's because neither my monitor nor my editing program, and I think YouTube also, don't support Dolby Vision. A detailed tutorial on Dolby Vision will follow soon on this channel. Now I would like to show you something else here with the shots of the iPhone. The iPhone tends to produce a lot of image noise in the dark areas around the edges if you use the ultra-wide lens. This is probably also due to the fact that the same exposure is created as with the standard lens, but the ultra-wide lens lets much less light in. We will see this again later in the low light test. Now I would like to compare some slow motion shots. There are several options available on both devices. With both cameras you can shoot in 4K 60 for a slow motion of up to 40%. With both cameras you also have the possibility to shoot in 1080p with 120 or 240 frames per second. Only the GoPro is then also able to shoot in 2.7K and 120 frames per second. If we look at two shots in 4K 60, here in a slow motion of 40%, I have to say that the GoPro shot looks clearly better and more detailed overall. The iPhone has a problem with compression artifacts, especially in this setting. To keep the file sizes small, the recordings are aggressively compressed. This can be seen well in the magnification if you look at the branches for example. Unpleasant artifacts are created. Also YouTube leads to further compression artifacts, so it's hard to say how well you can judge these results on YouTube. These two shots were taken in 1080-120. You can see the drop in image quality immediately. Both shots do not look very good and it is hard to judge which shot looks better overall. Interesting is that the iPhone in the high frame rate mode can't hold the high dynamic range anymore. You can see this for example here with the mountains in the background. A similar result can be seen when shooting with 1080-40 and using a slow motion of 10%. The shot of the GoPro contains a few more details here and looks a bit cleaner. You can see this for example in the magnification when looking at the bike. Here you can see a comparison with the standard lens of the iPhone. All in all, the images look very similar, although the GoPro has a few slight advantages. A very special challenge for these small cameras with their small sensors are recordings in low light and therefore also recordings indoors. Smaller sensors can only capture a small amount of light. The results are often ugly images with a lot of image noise. Which camera is better suited for these situations? With these first shots taken during the blue hour, you notice immediately that the iPhone exposes much brighter. The image of the iPhone was taken with the standard lens and looks much better. The image of the GoPro is much darker and still shows more noise. If we now look at the shot of the iPhone with the ultra-wide lens, we see that the quality is far from being as good as with the standard lens. This is mainly due to the smaller aperture of the ultra-wide lens. Both images now show similar amounts of noise, but the GoPro is also exposed much darker. In this situation, it was much darker and actually already nighttime. The iPhone can still produce usable images with the standard lens. The image of the GoPro is no longer usable. It is much too dark and shows a lot of noise. The shot of the iPhone with the ultra-wide lens looks similarly bad. The image is now almost as dark as with the GoPro and also shows a lot of noise. Both shots are not really usable. The GoPro is known for its excellent image stabilization. Let's take a look at how well the iPhone can keep up with the stabilization. Here you can see a walk-in test. On the iPhone I use the standard lens, on the GoPro the stabilization is only set to on. Apart from the fact that the iPhone produces a strange flickering when moving, the stabilization on the GoPro is clearly better and smoother. If we now make a comparison with the ultra-wide lens of the iPhone, we can see that the stabilization is now better and similar to the GoPro at on, but on is the weakest type of hyper-smooth stabilization. However, the iPhone still produces a slight flickering. In the running test, the differences are much bigger. The shot of the iPhone with the standard lens can hardly be used. Also, the shot with the ultra-wide lens of the iPhone is much worse stabilized than the shot of the GoPro. And if we set the stabilization to boost on the GoPro, the difference is even more noticeable, as you can see here. The GoPro would also have a medium stabilization level with high. However, high is not available in 5K. A very brief summary of the results of this comparison test. Both cameras produce very nice images for cameras of this size, and you definitely don't do anything wrong with both devices. Both have their strengths and weaknesses in a direct comparison. The iPhone 12 convinces with a high dynamic range and of course with 2 lenses with different focal lengths. On the iPhone 12 Pro there are even 3. The shots of the GoPro show more details and can be better cropped. The GoPro also has fewer problems with compression. The iPhone convinces in low light, especially if you use the standard lens. On the other hand, the GoPro has a clearly better stabilization. And that's it for today. Give me a like as feedback if the video was interesting for you. There will be more videos about the GoPro Hero 9 and the iPhone 12. So stay tuned and see you next time.